Hello and welcome to the Racing with Rob and Roller podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Roller, and I'm here in Charlotte, USA. The other half of the podcast namesake, Rob, Mr. Rob Peters, is in Indianapolis, where the Colts just lost, but they're in Baltimore. The home of the Colts just lost there in Baltimore. This is the post-Turkey and ROVAL show. There's plenty of news, however, to dissect as well, and on top of the races there. Rob is going to talk us through Formula One's Turkish Grand Prix, where Valtteri Bottas gained what could prove to be his final victory in a Civil Aero's machine. AJ Allmendinger's wife may be Mrs. North Carolina, but he is Mr. ROVAL. He just earned his third straight win on the oval road course combination at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And Hendrick Motorsports won its third straight win at the ROVAL, but it wasn't with Chase Elliott, though it could have been. Rather, it was Kyle Larson, who now has more wins, 7, this season than he did in his first 6 full-time Cup Series seasons combined. So there you go. What a 2021 it's been for him. Rob, there's a lot to talk about in this news portion alone here. We try to set a market. We tend to go over that. So let's just go ahead and jump right into that. So kick us off with Rob's Racing Report.
Guys, welcome to Rob's Racing Report. I'm going to go over the news of the past week. We're going to go ahead and start off with Formula One. Adam Stern shared last week that F1 is considering a third race in the United States following substantial growth in the country. He named Las Vegas in the tweet as a potential host city, specifically a race on the Las Vegas Strip. So we could be potentially getting a Formula One race on the Las Vegas Strip. Hopefully it's not a repeat of the Caesar Palace Grand Prix, because Lord knows everybody, that was a bad idea.
Thank goodness that doesn't even exist. It's like a hotel, pool, and parking garage now, the lot there. So good.
As long as we're not getting that, because by the way, that entire layout still looks crazy stupid to me. It doesn't look like it should be a racetrack. It looks like something completely different. It looks like a giant
go-kart track at like NASCAR Speed Park. That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like it should be a professional circuit.
It was very odd. If you don't know what we're talking about, please look up the Caesars Palace Grand Prix and then never watch a race there, because they're all terrible. Moving on to some IndyCar news. Jack Harvey has been confirmed to Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. He will pilot the number 45 Hy-Vee Honda. Graham Rahal will continue to drive the number 15 and the third full-time entry for Rahal Letterman Racing. The number 30 is still TBD, to be announced. Oliver Askew, Santino Ferrucci, and Christian Lundgaard are the suspected potential candidates. But now keep in mind, there's still a decent amount of free agents out there on the market. Not just free agents in IndyCar, but also free agents coming from Europe, as well as free agents coming up through the Indy Lights program. Very, very possible that 30 could be a very highly desired race seat by any of those free agent drivers. Obviously, we mentioned the drivers who have run for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing in the Jack Harvey's now 45, but previously it was just a third entry, the 45. But like I said, Askew and Ferrucci and Lundgaard. Don't know who it's going to be. Ferrucci seems kind of happy in NASCAR. Maybe he'd be willing to go back to IndyCar. I don't know. Askew definitely would love to get into IndyCar. I don't see Lundgaard doing another season of F2, and his F1 chances have pretty much closed down. He was an Alpine Driver Academy driver, and Alpine sticking with Fernando Alonso seems like, as long as Alonso's there, and as long as Ocon doesn't leave, Alpine Academy drivers are kind of up a creek without a paddle. So Lundgaard's definitely looking elsewhere.
Up a creek without a boat, even.
You don't have a boat either, man. So, sometimes these driver academies, they don't always promise you rides. They don't promise you F1 rides. They promise you, okay, we'll help you, learn how to race and get you F3, F2 rides, but they never promise you an F2 ride. It always seems, but everybody seems to think it's a given because you're in the driver academy. You think, oh, this person is, being hyped up as the next driver for Ferrari, but or Alpine or whoever, or it's Sauber in some cases, and they always go with a veteran driver.
Yeah,
it almost always happens. And speaking of some Formula One, this ties into IndyCar, but it's also Formula One. So I put it in IndyCar because it's what it talks about, what this concerns, is more IndyCar based than Formula One based, at least right now. So if you haven't heard, there's been a lot of rumors. You can't go, 2 steps on the internet without running into some of these rumors, at least if you follow as much auto racing news as I do, and as probably Josh does. But rumors are very hot regarding a possible buyout of Sauber Group by Michael and Mario Andretti. Mario and Michael have apparently created a special purpose acquisition company, or an SPAC, with the intention of buying into a Formula One team. The rumors claim that Andretti intends to purchase an 80% stake in the Sauber Alfa Romeo F1 team, and that Colton Herta will drive for the team as a teammate to Valtteri Bottas in 2021. Now, there are a number of issues with the Herta part, mainly stemming from the lack of super license points, but the actual acquisition itself has not been entirely debunked or denied. So, Sauber is apparently open, and Alfa Romeo are open to this partnership with Andretti if it is, again, this is the thing. They say, oh, we're not denying it, but we're going to tell you that we're open to it. Well, okay, if you're open to it, then you're probably already having discussions, right? That's kind of PR speak for we're having discussions already. So we can take that at face value and kind of say, okay, there might be something here, there might be something here. But what I really wanted to talk about in this news piece is the part about Colton Herta, because the part about Colton Herta is what really is blowing my mind about all of this. I don't know where this rumor got started. I want to know who decided to assume that once Michael Andretti buys into a Formula One team, he's going to plop Colton Herta out from his IndyCar team and move him into the Formula One team. I don't know why people think that. I understand, people are thinking, oh, well, Liberty wants an American F1 driver. Okay, but Liberty isn't going to go that far, I don't think. And if they were, why are they not putting more money into Logan Sargent? Because there's a potential American F1 driver that is right here who has proven himself capable to race in these types of cars. He has proven himself as the type of driver that Formula One teams can rely on. I think last year, in 2020, when he lost the championship with Prema, that was a very difficult season. He wasn't necessarily as consistent as maybe he needed to have been, but it was his second year in F3. He does his third year in F3. He gets the Charoux, which should not have been competitive in the slightest. In 2020, Charoux scored 0 points in Formula 3 out of 3 drivers. They had 3 drivers and scored 0 points as a team. And this year, in 2021, Logan Sargent came out, got their first win, Charouz's first ever win in Formula 3, finished 7th in the points, and scored all but, I think, a handful of their overall team's points.
3, I think you mentioned.
All but 3, I think, yeah. So if Liberty is going to throw money at somebody, I don't know why they would be throwing it at Colton Herta when Sargent is right here. I don't know if they're just blind to this and not paying attention to F2 and F3, which it wouldn't surprise me because it looks like a lot of F1 teams tend to be blind towards the drivers that actually are trying to get to F1 and have talent to do so, and they always end up having to settle for something outside of F1. Usually they end up loving it, but it's kind of like second best. You wanted to get to F1. Yeah, you're happy to still be a driver. Yeah, it's great to have fun, but when your career ends, you're probably going to regret not having run an F1, depending on how your career turns out. Yeah. This is one of those situations where I don't understand why they would pick Colton Herta. So first of all, and I mentioned this, he doesn't have enough super license points. The Indy Lights champion does not get enough super license points, especially considering the fact that the Indy Lights doesn't even have enough cars for it to really qualify for super license. I think the Nathan Brown article, because I work for IndyStar, so that's what I'm citing here. That's one of the main ones that I read. The Nathan Brown article, he mentions in there how it kind of threw a curveball for Pato O'Ward, and it's thrown now a curveball potentially for Colton Herta, in the fact that Indy Lights typically had less than 12 full-time drivers. And I believe he said in that article, you need to have, the feeder series needs to have more than at least 12 full-time drivers in order for full super license points to be awarded. So again, and Herta has not finished high enough in the IndyCar championship yet to warrant having the required 40 super license points. Pato O'Ward, however, is basically almost there by finishing second in the or third in the championship. He's basically almost there. But that also depends on whether or not his Lights championship is considered the same way, which I don't think it would be right now. So really, if you're trying to poach anybody from the F1 paddock, from the IndyCar paddock and promote them to F1, you're going to have a heck of a time finding somebody who has enough super license points who isn't happy in F1. Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden have the required amount of super license points, but why would they leave?
Yeah,
what would they have to prove? Newgarden and Dixon have already proven themselves as good drivers. They don't need F1 to prove anything to anybody.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying you just focus your money on the drivers that are actually there to try and get to F1 instead of drivers who have already made a living in IndyCar and are content making a living in IndyCar.
Well, and I will just add one quick point too, because you hit a lot of points in the last couple minutes. I would say, I would find it foolish that if, let's say, Andretti closes a deal on the team today, and he wants to put Colton Herta in the car, and he theoretically is able to. I feel like it's really late in the game to be prepared for whatever race is going to be first up on the calendar in early March or February, whenever the season gets going. I just feel like there wouldn't be enough time to properly prepare in the transition. And maybe if he spent every day in the simulator, he could, but I just don't feel like he'd be ready. And maybe that's just, maybe I'm not giving Colton enough credit, or maybe I'm giving too much credit to the F1 difficulty of the car. I just feel like that would be a foolish move myself.
I don't think you're entirely off base there. I think you're more on point than you think you are, because you look at how Tsunoda, Mazepin, and Schumacher have struggled this year. Now, Tsunoda has by far the better car out of the three, but even then, there's a lot of things in F1 that it's going to take a year or two to get used to. And a lot of that comes not just with how much you have to mess around with on the steering wheel, but also a lot of it comes into driving style. You really have to change and adapt your driving style for Formula One. And, there's plenty of interviews with Roman Grosjean about this, where Grosjean talks about the differences. In Formula One, it's more about tire management than anything, whereas in IndyCar, you're free to go full throttle as much as you want. You don't have to half throttle it here and there because you got to watch after your tires to meet some kind of mark like you would in Formula One. I look at Colton Herta's driving style and how aggressive it is, and given the amount of mistakes that he can still make. I mean, he's early in his career. It happens. Young drivers tend to be more mistake prone than older ones. So I'm not saying he won't get there with age, but right now in Colton Herta's career, I don't think he would mesh well in Formula One. I think he would just be too far off the pace, and especially when he would be apparently teamed with Valtteri Bottas. You're making him look even worse, because Bottas has multiple F1 wins. He just won this past weekend. He's been teammates with Lewis Hamilton. He was basically team leader at Williams. I mean, people could say it was Massa, but no, Massa just had the experience. Bottas was the driver that was keeping Williams in the points all those years. But Bottas is a very consistent driver. He hasn't been consistent the last couple of years, but when he was with Williams, he was very consistent. He was outrageously consistent. Herta has not shown that level of consistency that I think he really needs to in order to be considered a viable Formula One driver. It's not just the fact that I think about the Nashville race, where he was faster than everybody else and blew it with a late race accident all by himself. And that's not to say that I think that makes Colton Herta a bad driver. I just think it makes him not F1 ready, or I think that his career has gone down the IndyCar route, and I think his driving style, it's going to be too hard for him to change it to match with Formula One. I don't think he should be wasting prime years of his career where he can be learning and winning races in IndyCar and challenging for championships and Indy 500 victories to be running around at the back of a grid in Formula One.
I agree.
I don't see it as being necessary. There are better options out there for Michael Andretti and Sauber Group to hire right now, not just the ones in F2 right now that I think should definitely be getting shots, like someone like Guan Yu Zhou, like someone like Robert Schwartzman, like someone, like Christian Lundgaard. These guys are like someone like Oscar Piastri, like Teo Pulcher. I'm just thinking of these guys off the top of my head that are probably not going to get to F1, unfortunately, despite really how good they are and how young they are. I look at Pulcher. He's fast, he's quick. Piastri, he's fast, he's quick. Joe, he's fast, he's quick. But where are these guys going to go? They're aligned with driver academies, but those driver academies are kind of closed at the moment. They're not allowing for F1 drivers to get in there. And I just think if you're Sauber and you want to make a splash with a young driver, you pick from one of those. You don't go and try and steal somebody from IndyCar. You pick somebody who's F1 ready, who's been in F2, who knows how to manage tires, who knows how to do all that, because that's what they teach you in F2. They're not teaching you that in IndyCar. In IndyCar, they're asking you to, hey, go as fast as you can and maybe make one or two fuel map. Maybe hit your fuel numbers, and that's pretty much it. I should move on, but that's how I feel about this whole rumor. Like I said, I want to go back over this, and I want to say the Herta rumor is just a rumor. Nothing has been confirmed on that. It seems very unlikely that it's even actually true. However, there is a strong possibility that Mario and Michael Andretti legitimately could take a buyout of 80% of the Sauber group. That is the actual news here that needs to be reported on, and that is what we do know. But as far as everything else we've talked about, this is all just straight rumors. Yeah. So we're going to move on here, talk about some quick Supercars news that broke over the weekend. Jack LeBrock has announced he will leave Tickford Racing at the conclusion of the 2021 season. LeBrock scored his first career win with Tickford and his first career Supercars win, period, at Sydney Motorsports Park last year. Now, he has not announced yet where he will drive next year. However, Tickford did announce LeBrock's replacement as Jake Kostecki, one of the three Kostecki brothers out in family, the Kostecki family. I don't know if they're all brothers. I think one of them are cousins, but the three, it's Jake Kostecki, it's Brody Kostecki, and who's the other Kostecki? I don't watch enough Supercars to remember this off my head. And then Supercars fans are probably going to be like, "You idiot! How do you not remember this?" And I'm just going to be like, "I'm sorry, I should have written it down." But anyway, Tickford has announced Jake Kostecki as the replacement for LeBrock. Kostecki will depart Matt Stone Racing to pair with Cam Waters and James Courtney next year at Tickford. So that could be a very good move for Kostecki because Tickford has been definitely making a lot of strides. Cam Waters has been easily Shane Van Gisbergen's number one rival this year in terms of fighting him for race wins. Not so much the championship, but mostly race wins. Definitely could see some good things out of there because Jake's not been... He's not been bad. Matt Stone Racing is the best team, but I'm curious and interested to see how he does because if LeBrock managed to eke out a win last year, and I still think he could finish out the season potentially scoring another win if the cards align properly because we've seen Waters do it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do it as well, LeBrock do it as well. But definitely interesting. More Supercars news again. We're still waiting on the next Supercars race. It's supposed to happen at the end of this month. Halloween is when we're getting our next Supercars race, but the silly season is still rolling. Rolling, even though we still haven't finished the season. Now moving on into NASCAR news. We got a lot of NASCAR news here, so I'm going to try and go through this. Michael Annett is announced he is retiring from full-time competition at the conclusion of the 2021 season. Annett has missed 7 races since July due to a leg injury that has lingered. Now, Annett did say, he talked to Bob Pockrass about this, and I don't think the retirement was necessarily related to his injury, more so just related to him having more time to, not be on the road, not be traveling all the time, and kind of reevaluate what he wants to do with his own life.
That's what an injury like this will do to you, though. You spent so much time at home, like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
It gives you a new headspace.
It does. And I think that Annett he said about in that interview with Pockrass, he seemed very happy to see Josh Berry get a win. And it seemed kind of like he was like, I want to see these guys win more. And I don't want to say he was admitting that Berry gave him a better chance, but I think he had this undertone of kind of like, I don't know that I can get it done anymore, and I don't want to be in the way of anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I hate it that the fans really you put it like really nice, and the fans on like social media were like, "This is why Barry should be in the car 9 and Annett." Annett is a solid top 10 performer.
I have nothing wrong with Annett.
And there were so many races over the past 3 years that if pit strategy or if a caution, like he was leading and then or like running right there, he needed a caution or didn't get a caution, he could have won the race. And he's always going to have that one win 2019 Daytona in February, awful race, but he still won. He was able to win the race. But I'm wondering, because I don't think he's been asked yet, if any of his partners would be willing to kind of step up and go behind Barry. Because he almost gave him a couple of victories here, not just the one in Vegas. So he almost gave Pilot a win. The Pilot Flying J a win in Michigan. Gave Team C a victory there in Vegas. So hey, I would like
to say anything bad about Michael Annett. I have nothing bad to say about him. And, if you look at what Annett has done, 3 out of the last 4 seasons, he's made the playoffs for Junior Motorsports. Obviously didn't make it this year, but I'm not really counting this year because he missed races due to injury. But in the races that he ran every race, he made the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years. He's always been a solid top 10 driver. It's not like he's back there in 20th in race winning cars. He's just, the problem is when you have teammates who are just better than you, and it's not to say that Annett's a bad driver. It's just there's other drivers who are better, and that's not an insult to Annett. That's not to say Annett's a bad driver. He's been a solid driver. He's been he's been an above average driver. I would say it's just people point to him because he hasn't won a lot. He has. Well, Daniel Hemrick's not won a lot at all. Daniel Hemrick has less wins than Michael Annett in NASCAR, but people will put Hemrick above him for some reason, even though I think Hemrick should have had a win by now. And if you want my honest opinion, I'm more upset with Hemrick not winning than I am with Annett. I think Annett never came out here and basically was touted as the next hot shot. He was always somebody who came. He kept a low profile. He ran really well, really solid, and just kind of went home and left. And then everybody in the media, this isn't Hemrick's fault, but the media kind of came in and said, "Oh, hey, Hemrick, he's really good. He's going to go to Cup." And Richard Childress was really high on him, and everybody was and he's just not performed to expectations. And it's like, if you really want someone to criticize, I'm going to criticize Hemrick more than I'm going to criticize Annett. And that's unfair to Hemrick because I'm kind of just using him as a red herring in this situation. But that's my point, is nobody on Twitter or social media or whatever should be knocking Annett. Annett went out there, achieved his dream, didn't take a ride from anybody. I mean, the one wouldn't exist unless the one that car has only existed since it has sponsorship. Elliott Sadler brought sponsorship to that car, and without that, it wouldn't have existed. Michael Annett brought sponsorship to the car, and I guarantee you, without that, it wouldn't have existed. So if anything,
5 before that, they moved into the 1. But
the
thing that really hurts here, you brought on here is I'm pretty sure Junior Motorsports was going to be 5 cars next year if Annett doesn't retire. They were going to be 5 cars. I don't think they're going to be 5 cars next year with Annett not coming back. So they'll stay 4 full-time cars and only bring a 5th when Junior runs his race.
He provided jobs.
Funding
provided jobs for people.
Yes.
And that's another thing that that's another positive thing. There's not a lot of negative things you could say about Michael Annett, except for like maybe the 2011 DUI. There's really not a lot of negative stuff you could say about him except for that.
Right.
I'm going to be honest.
I forgot about that. So yeah,
a lot of people did. Yeah. And that's okay because he's kept a low profile and he's not been in your face and he's not claimed to be better than he was. He's a good, genuine, honest guy who has just kind of realized his time is up.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Moving on here, Jeb Burton has confirmed at frontstretch.com that he will not be returning to Kaulig racing in 2022.
That's sad.
Disappointing news there from Jeb, but it was probably going to be tough for him to find some funding once Nutrient Ag Solutions dropped out, because I don't think a lot of Jeb's personal sponsors are willing to fund the whole season. They seem more willing to fund a few races here and there, so I think Jeb is going to be really focusing on trying to get some kind of full-time sponsor behind him, if possible, so that he could continue to go Xfinity racing with whatever team that is. I don't know, but disappointing.
Very.
Now let's talk about some next-gen news. By the time you listen to this, the next-gen test at Charlotte Motor Speedway's Roval will have already concluded, and so will have Kaz Grala driving for Starcom Racing in the test. So we thought Starcom Racing was they were going to sell their charter. Now we find out that Kaz Grala is testing their next-gen car, and there's maybe a potential possibility that they run a handful of races as an unchartered entry next year.
Yeah, I think they're going to sell their charter. I think they're going to run as an open team with some backing from Grala and maybe other drivers.
Dude, literally anything's better than Quinn Houff. They could go out there and pick any pay driver that they wanted, and they would be better than Quinn Houff. I guarantee you. And I'm not saying Kaz Grala is a bad pay driver. Kaz is pretty decent for what he is. He's not a bad pay driver.
Really good on road
courses. Funding, great. But dude, literally, Starcom, anybody's better than who you got in that car right now. I don't care how much funding Quinn Houff is bringing. Anybody is better. Okay. So that was a thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about the next-gen ROVAL test probably next week because some very interesting things are coming out about this. It's a 2-day test. Yeah. So it's Monday, which was today, and now Tuesday, which is yesterday, I guess, if you're listening to this on Wednesday. Yeah. That is what is going on right now, the next-gen test on the ROVAL at Charlotte Motor Speedway. I've seen some videos, still not fully sold on that number placement, but there's other things that kind of make me excited for next year. Here's my thing. My hope is that the racing is good enough that I don't care that the numbers are moved forward. If the racing can be good enough that I don't care about that fact, I will be happy. But if the racing is more of the same, and the aesthetics of the cars are just so horrible for me, we're gonna have an issue.
I'll mention it now. I'll just kind of
go ahead. Yeah,
tease it. But there's a new team that you'll talk about here in a minute. The car looks good. I was buying one of these next gen cars. They look good. So
some of them, I will admit, some of them have
the car itself. The car itself. I'm talking about the car itself. I'm not talking about just saying the car looks good, and if it races as good as it looks, I think.
Well, I said the Gen 3 looked good, and the Gen 6 looked good, and it only raced good for like 1 or 2 seasons. So,
different administration, man. Different administration.
Definitely. This was interesting. I was surprised about this. This broke today. This next piece of news. Adam Stern reported that the Race Team Alliance, which I just now found out owned this,
you didn't know that?
Rebrand Speed51.com into Racing America and will become the central hub for NASCAR Cup Series content with Matt Weaver hired as editor-in-chief. Thoughts on this, Josh? Because I mean,
they want to. This is for the Cup teams, so they want to control. I don't know if they want to control the narrative, but I like what they're doing. They're trying to promote grassroots racing. Because if you don't have grassroots racing, you don't have NASCAR, right? You gotta have the lower divisions for that. I don't. As long as they don't get into a bitter battle with NASCAR and then other media outlets and TV partners, I don't have a problem with this. Good for them. Especially it gives more exposure and they do it the right way. And I think they got a good person to do it in Matt Weaver. So I don't have a problem. I can't say I'm neutral on this. It's a good move.
Yeah, I don't dislike Matt Weaver. I trust him. Yeah. I trust him to be fully unbiased and still the way he is. I still expect him to call it as he sees it.
Yeah.
But, it kind of throws in a little conflict of interest for me when you have the Race Team Alliance essentially owning a publication. It's kind of what you kind of said it, they can control the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I see this. I wonder if this is going to be more like a J-ski, where like if you go to this Race in America, you can see every single race teams who's a part of the Race Team Alliance, because every team is a part of the Race Team Alliance. You can see all the teams like press releases. Okay, here's what's going on. And then you have like a Twitter feed for all the teams on there. You're
replacing J-ski then, and I don't want to replace J-ski because J-ski is J-ski.
I know. But I'm just saying, maybe that's what they're trying to do. You want to go there. They want to. I'm sure the Race Team Alliance is going to be making money off this, right? For sponsorship, there's corporate sales. They're going to be making money off this. But if I'm remembering right, it's been I've slept once or twice since this first came about. But if I am remembering it correctly, the reason they wanted to buy is because they wanted to try to do some more promotion with the grassroots racing, the short track scene, and bolster that coverage. And because again, like I mentioned a couple seconds ago, that if you don't have people covering and paying attention to the grassroots, the lower divisions, the very at home track racing, going to those races, following a driver hit through his or her progression through to the Cup Series, you don't have a Cup Series in 10 years. You don't have a Cup Series in 15 years. So I
get that.
I don't know. It's different. It's sure. We don't really know what to expect until it gets on its feet.
I'm going to continue to use J-Ski just because J-Ski doesn't have that controlling interest of the Race Team Alliance. That's my whole take on that. Is OG. Yeah, I'm going to stick with J-Ski just because I don't have to worry about certain things maybe not being reported. You're going to find out about it on J-Ski regardless. Yeah. J-Ski doesn't care. J-Ski doesn't have an agenda necessarily. Maybe they did when they were with ESPN, but I don't think they do anymore. I don't think they ever did anyway.
I don't think they really did with they had a lot of ESPN stuff on there, but that's kind of been replaced by.
They've been a straight up news aggregation site for as long as I can remember, and I really I have no reason to dump them for something funded by Rob Kaufman's crooked little group in the RTA.
J-Ski's always going to be a go-to place.
That was my opinion. So here's the next piece of news. Whelen Engineering will be sponsoring Sheldon Creed for the full 2020 Xfinity Series season in Richard Childress Racing, and that pretty much confirmed as well. There were confirmations in and amongst that Myatt Snider is probably not going to return to RCR.
No, it sounds like he's going to remain with the RCR group, but not driving in the Xfinity Series. But there's going to be a teammate for Sheldon Creed.
They're gonna try and find. This is what I heard: is they're gonna try and find a place for Snider in an RCR affiliated team.
Yeah,
and they're gonna kind of share information back and forth, but they're not. But Snider, as far as him running for RCR next year, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So you're looking at Colleague and Big Machine, because those are the two affiliated Xfinity teams, anyways.
We'll see. And you talked about it earlier. A new team is set to join the NASCAR Cup Series in 2022. We've got a lot of new teams coming to NASCAR. Hoping we're going to see some more DNQs. Yes. I hate it for certain teams, but I like it for the sake of competition.
Yeah,
and competitive.
It makes qualifying interesting again.
Yes, it gives you a reason to watch qualifying. Why do you think people show up to the Indianapolis 500 qualifying? It's because it's the only frickin' qualifying we get anymore where there's a possibility that people won't make the race and it's emotional. I mean, you don't get Formula One never enacts the 107% rule anymore. They almost never do. You don't see guys DNQing for F1 races. NASCAR hasn't had a DNQ. Only has one DNQ, and that's during Daytona. You see couple, maybe one or two cars, maybe sometimes three miss the show for the 500
2 years ago.
Yeah, four missed 2 years ago. Yeah. But for every year, it's the only races you rarely see cars fail to qualify are at Indianapolis and Daytona, and it's kind of like, would we please get more of that? Not to screw the teams, but just to at least see some competition, at least to make qualifying more entertaining. For not just the fans, but also for everybody involved. It's more entertaining when there's something on the line to have to qualify for. You know what I mean?
I agree.
So, anyway. That point is, a new team is coming to the Cup Series in 2022. It's going to be Team Hezeberg, powered by the Reum brothers. The team owners are... how do you pronounce this, Josh? Do you know? Because I don't watch enough Whelen Euro NASCAR.
I honestly could not hear
so Hezemans and a Dutch entrepreneur, Ernst Berg. I'm Dutch. I should be able to pronounce it. I don't know. The drivers will be Loris Hezemans and Jacques Villeneuve. Now, this is just in the test, I think, the Roval test.
They might put Jacques in the car next year. Might.
I read that Jacques Villeneuve was in for the Roval test, but he had potential to run for the team. So we got guaranteed cautions. I know that. We got guaranteed cautions. We got a lot of hot takes.
Oh, yeah.
And we got one really, really bad debut solo album. That's what we're getting in Jacques Villeneuve coming to Cup Series next year.
Yeah.
The team plans to just compete. I know it's Jacques, but Paul Page used to call him Jack Villeneuve back in the day, and when I used to watch that all the time, it kind of just stuck. So now every time in my head, I forget it's Jacques Villeneuve. He's French Canadian.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, Paul Page used to call him Jack Villeneuve, and I stupidly still think that in my head. I don't know why.
I have the same problem.
You have the same problem too? Okay,
I do.
I'm glad I'm not alone. I'm glad I'm not alone. Rick Ware Racing is set to join Ford Performance beginning in 2022. Rick Ware Racing will use Roush Yates engines and will have a technical alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing. Car owner Rick Ware anticipates 2 full-time entries, and with a third if the right opportunities come through. Obviously, we know Rick Ware; he'll pull out a third car if someone brings sponsorship. We know that. Even if the car is broken off the
sounded. That's the way the press conference sounded. Like if I feel like it's. I got the interpretation that there's 2 for sure, but he's kind of like at the point now. I want to do it the right way. Now that he hasn't doing it the right way, the plans for 2021 got thrown for a loop when the next gen car was delayed.
Yeah.
But I feel like he doesn't want to do 3 if it can't make it work financially. So he's not going to just throw a bunch of drivers in there. That's the way I read the room. So
there's some good free agents on the market right now.
Yeah,
and if Rick Ware can come up with, I don't know how he managed to get, whatever sponsor is sponsoring Cody and Grosjean.
Yeah,
Nurtec, that's what it is. Nurtec.
Yeah, Nurtec.
I don't know how he negotiated that deal, but if he can negotiate a deal that's anywhere similar to that for any of those, free agent drivers. There's a solid amount of free agent drivers next year that are probably looking for a place to go.
He did say this too. I don't know if you remember. Did you read or watch the
I didn't see much of the press conference at all. I read one article and that was about it.
Okay, I forget who it was who asked the question, but like they mentioned Ryan Newman and Matt Benedetto, and he didn't want to commit. Yeah, I would love to have them, but he more so said I would like to have them, but if they come to my team and we don't perform to their ability, that makes us look really bad.
Yeah.
At the same time, so that's kind of he's well aware of that risk versus reward, type scenario. But it's kind of also what could Matt Benedetto and Ryan Newman bring to you? Because we already know both those drivers elevate whichever team they go to. It's just kind of like, okay, where are we going to be next year? How's this alliance and new engines going to help us? Where's your level of confidence type of deal? I don't know.
Cody didn't have a great race at the Roval, but I've noticed, his pace overall the last couple of weeks has been up. Obviously, the other 3 Rick Ware cars I kind of just ignore most of the time. Usually the 53, or if it's Davison or Smithley. If Davison or Smithley is in the 53, usually it's okay. Yaley's actually been pretty good as well. JJ Yaley has. But, if it's Bilicki's kind of an afterthought. Joey Gase is an afterthought. Guys like that. But in terms of the drivers that I would argue under Rick Ware's talent fleet that actually do have some driving ability, that would be the Cody Ware, the James Davison, the Garrett Smithleys. And the JJ Yaleys. They are performing much better than I think they have been in past seasons. They're more competitive with drivers that they're around. It's not like you have the 4 Rick Ware cars running together at the back. They're more spread out around the field now. Obviously, like I said, Gase is always going to be at the back no matter what. He has no pace whatsoever. But everybody else is pretty good. Yeah, you're talking about 40 minutes. Let's get through this here. Next piece of news, GMS Racing has announced Ty Dillon as their driver of the 94 Chevrolet in 2022 and beyond. Team president Mike Beam shared that the team is searching for a charter and hopes to acquire one, but only for the right price. Ty Dillon said that Maury Gallagher is willing to run the 2022 season without a charter. Mike Beam expects 3 full-time Trucks Series teams and a new alliance with Richard Childress Racing will take effect. So this is huge for GMS. I think that alliance with Richard Childress Racing made sense. Once they brought in Ty Dillon, I think Ty could probably pull some strings there to kind of help that team out, and that was probably a big reason for why they got Ty. But also, Ty's a good driver. Ty has been down on his luck this season. He had some fairly decent runs with Gibbs. Terrible luck, but good pace.
Had good runs with our motorsports as well. I mean,
exactly.
He's ran well with them, and
Jordan Anderson's team too.
Yep. Yeah. I encourage you.
Ty's been a journeyman this whole season, and I think it's humbled him a lot more. I mean, not to say Ty wasn't humble. I got the indication that Ty was a humble person before this year, but I think it humbled him even more, and him having this opportunity is great. I think it's great for GMS to have someone like Ty in that car who not only can kind of help your team out because he's got connections. I mean, look, the only way you advance anywhere is if you have connections, and I don't think this is anybody saying, oh, Ty Dillon is still getting silver spoon this. No, I don't think he was silver spoon this at all. I think the fact of the matter is they saw what Ty could give them, and Ty saw what he could bring GMS, and this partnership happened because it's going to work. It's going to be beneficial for both parties. Ty can pull some strings, and obviously worked. It probably helped Ty being employed there now helped bring forth kind of an alliance with RCR, because I know Richard Childress probably wanted to see Ty in another car, but was not going to offer him Reddick's spot or open up a third car for him, especially since he doesn't have sponsorship. Yeah. This is an opportunity where Ty doesn't need the sponsorship, and he can still bring something to the table, not just as a driver, but also in the form of a technical alliance.
Yeah. I encourage anyone to go back, if you can, watch this interview, watch this press conference, and just listen and watch Mike Beam when he's talking about charters. Just do it. It was, you could just tell the frustration with dealing with the charter market right now. And like before that, you could tell like Mike Beam, isn't a guy who gets riled up. And then oh wait, he can get riled up. And it was quite telling. And it was funny because this press conference was before the Rick Ware announcement, and someone asked Rick Ware, hey, he just brought up, Mike Beam just brought up the charter deal, and Rick Ware didn't dodge the question, but I don't know. Mike Beam,
Rick Ware is sitting on a gold mine right now because I think he knows that he has 2 charters he can sell off.
He's got 3.
Bank off of them.
He can't sell the petty wear.
No,
he can't sell the petty wear, but he's got.
I didn't think he was going to sell a second one. If I'm Rick Ware, I keep 2 charters and sell 2.
He only has 1. He only has 3. He only owns 3. He confirmed that he only has 3.
Okay, he only has 3.
So
that's why I said sell 1.
Yeah, he sell 1, but the petty one could go. Petty could either open up another team or lease that one to someone.
Well, either way, Rick Ware is. This is the thing when that announcement happened is not only is this guy basically sitting on a gold mine, he's got a charter that is highly valued. People want it, despite the fact that it might not technically have a lot of value because it's probably finished and it's been close to finishing in the bottom half of the season, the bottom 35 or whatever. But that's still a charter. That still guarantees you entry, and there's a lot of people trying to get into NASCAR, and I think Rick Ware knows that. So the fact that he's partnering now with Ford, he's partnering with Stewart-Haas, if he sells his charter for the right price, they could start out with a very hefty financial advantage next year that I think would help them a lot in terms of getting up to speed. Yeah. We'll see, like I said, who he hires and where their pace lines up with Cody's, but anything can happen. This last piece of news here I want to talk about before we move on, this is really huge. It's mainly really only important to me, but I want to talk about it because I think it's so cool. NASCAR Heat Ultimate Edition Plus is reported to be coming to the Nintendo Switch on November 19th of this year. The game will be the full version of NASCAR Heat 5, but with the inclusion of 2021 paint schemes for the Cup Series. The release will mark the first time a NASCAR game has appeared on a Nintendo console since NASCAR the Game Inside Line came out for the Wii in 2012, and also the first time a NASCAR game will be on a handheld video game console since NASCAR 07 was ported to the PSP in 2006.
Well, there you go.
I'm just excited about that because I'm a Switch owner and I've been waiting for this moment for like over a year now.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the race report, Rob. Thanks for sharing all that. We had some good conversations there. Again, a lot to share just in the NASCAR side, but also a big point with the Andretti and Sauber Group deal there and Colton Herta. Featured paint scheme time. We're doing the 2005 NASCAR Busch Series for a second time. We did this last in our first year, 2019. I was on the August 27th episode. Rob picked the 79 Evernham Motorsports Dodge driven by who drove that car? Was it
it was a combination between Mayfield and Kane.
Mayfield
They both drove that car. They both drove that car on separate occasions in different races, but yeah, it was Mayfield and Casey Kane that both drove the car.
And I drove and I picked a combination one, the 21 RCR Reese Chevrolet. So, Rob, what was your pick for part 2 here? You actually have a good one. You actually really have a good one.
This one was interesting because sometimes what I like to do is throughout the week I like to look at where NASCAR is going next, and I like to watch like old races from that track. And so as I was doing this, I didn't know you were going to pick this, but as I was doing this like last week, I was watching old Busch races from Charlotte in the fall race. Mm-hmm. And 2005, I was watching that, and I remember, and I saw this car, and I had remembered it ran, but it's still this weird anomaly to me. Mm-hmm. Seeing it watching that old race and seeing it again, I was like, wow, this was 2005. So my pick is Tony Stewart's number 19 DLP Chevrolet that he drove in the fall race at Charlotte Motor Speedway. This paint scheme ran almost 5 full months before the Hall of Fame Racing DLP number 96 would run. Hall of Fame Racing was that deal with Troy Aikman and who else was it? Troy Aikman and someone else. I can't remember. A bunch of Hall of Famers basically came together and
look it up.
Formed a race team and decided to hire for the driver the person who would never be in any Hall of Fame, probably, Tony Raines. This isn't a knock on Tony Raines. I just find his driving career to be outrageously mediocre.
Roger Staubach, Troy Aikman, and Bill Saunders, a Trans Am driver.
Okay, so Staubach and Troy Aikman, 2 football players and a Trans Am driver.
Oh, by the way, real quick, how about them Cowboys? Okay, so I had to do that.
You have a lot more going for you in football because Russell Wilson just got hurt. He's out for like 4 to 8 weeks. So the Seahawks are going to be playing Geno Smith, and Lord knows I'm not ready for that. I don't want this. I cannot stand this. Yeah, you enjoy your Cowboys. Because they're looking pretty good this year. So I guess if the Seahawks can't go all the way, I guess I'll hope that you have a good football season. Anyway, but this paint scheme was basically the exact same as that paint scheme, which is crazy because that team, I don't know if that team had even been announced at that point. Maybe it had, or maybe it was in the beginning stages. But DLP, I remember that whole thing, the DLP, the mirror-based HD television. I just remember people telling me they got headaches after watching it.
It was announced on November 3rd, 2005.
So this was before that. This race was like a full month. So this paint scheme raced a full month before that announcement, which is crazy. And this is insane to me because they didn't change the paint scheme. Basically, they ran this paint scheme for Joe Gibbs in the Busch series with the blue, the black, the green, stuff looking like that. And the crazier part about this was, not only was this scheme elevated to the Cup Series 5 months later, but it marked one of the first times Joe Gibbs ran the number 19 prior to it becoming part of the team with Carl Edwards in 2015. So this was 10 years prior to them using the 19 full-time. Before this, Gibbs' numbers were basically the 11, the 18, and the 20, and you didn't think of any other number as being Joe Gibbs. I think they ran Mike Bliss in the number 80 in 2004.
They ran the 48 in the Truck Series for the Gibbs boys.
Did they? That's right, they
48
did.
MB&A Chevrolet.
Oh my gosh, you're right, they did. That was. But anyway, so we got 19, number 19, a Joe Gibbs car, number 19. We got a DLP paint scheme that's exactly like this car was just a how do I describe it? This car was just a portal to the future. You look at it, and it has futuristic things that in 2005 you didn't know were going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And much later, now we look at this here in 2021, and we think about, wow, look at all these things that were on this car before they actually became part of NASCAR for a period of time. Bobby Labonte also drove a number 19 car in the Busch Series at Kansas, but that was a much different car. That was a DLP car.
Was it a Slim Jim car?
Yeah, that was a Slim Jim car.
Yeah.
But Tony Stewart in this race finished 21st after an accident. It's okay. It was a Busch race, and pretty much, man, I forgot how bad bushwhacking was back then.
Oh, bushwhacking was horrible back then.
I think about, I watched a lot of the nationwide race at series for like 07 to like to 2010, 2011, and I thought the bushwhacking was not great, but still pretty bad. But man, I kind of had blocked out that in 2004, 5, and 6, the Busch Series was basically just Cup Race 2.0, like Cup Race Light.
Yes,
it was just a precursor to what you were going to see on Sunday, basically. I mean, you were not going to see any other driver that was not in a Cup team win that race. Like, David Rudiman is not going to win this race. Like, I'm sorry. No matter what happens. You might hope that he does, but it's not going to happen. It wasn't until, like, Brad Keselowski came along in 07 where it was like, Keselowski was around before then, but he wasn't competitive.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until, like, Keselowski started driving for Junior Motorsports where it was like, oh, wow, there's a legitimate regular that can compete for wins now.
Yeah, like the last, like for 06 was the championship was won by Harvick, but I mean it was 06,
Harvick
7,
had like
8.
a 300-point gap going into this race that I'm talking about. Yeah, I think if I remember that correctly, it was like 200, 250 or 300 point gap.
Truex won the 05 championship. Truex won the 05 championship.
Truex won back-to-back in 04 and 05.
Yeah.
And then got promoted to Cup for 06 in a dying DEI.
Yes. All right, well, I'll share mine here. I went with Sterling Marlin's number 40 Jana King Dodge. The car was owned by Chip Ganassi, and the number 40 was styled just like CGR's 40 Cup car. Base black, and it had red flames with yellow accents, like right on the front of the nose. And it really didn't go up any further than the headlight stickers. Very, very abrupt ending. Like start and end on it. But it was a good looking car though. Still a great looking car. And then it had a hollowed out curved diamond in the middle of the doors. I don't know. I tried to find the best way to describe this. But that's how I would describe it. It's a hollowed out diamond, and instead of being flat on the four sides, it's inward curved. Those were red with yellow accents, and then the number was yellow with white and black accents. He ran 19 races in the Xfinity Series that year. Was going to run 20. Do you know why he didn't run the 20th row?
I do not. I'm curious.
Okay.
Why did Sterling Marlin not run the 20th?
Reed Sorensen DNQ'd at Atlanta in the spring in the 41 discount tire Dodge, and he took over the 40 because he was running for the championship that year. So he took over the 40 with Jana King and discount tire sponsorship for that race for Sterling.
You know what always bugs me? Is how good Reed Sorensen was in the Busch Series and even later in the Nationwide Series, but just how completely forgettable and awful he was in the Cup Series. Like, if Reed Sorensen never went to the Cup Series and stayed his whole career in the Busch Series, I guarantee you everybody would have a much higher opinion of him than they do right now.
You're probably right. He ran this paint scheme. Sterling Marlin ran this paint scheme. We should get back to Sterling. At Daytona, Fontana, Nashville Superspeedway, Bristol, Texas, Talladega, Darlington, Charlotte, and Gateway. He had a best finish of he had a best start of 4th at Darlington and the best finish of 2nd at Charlotte. That was in May. Carlos Contreras also ran this scheme at Phoenix late in the season. He started 42nd, finished 30th. And Paul Wolfe ran this scheme at IRP. He started 37th and finished 38th.
How did they get Carlos Contreras
He ran 4 or 5 races in this car, or in the 40 car that year.
That's the thing, but I associate Carlos Contreras more so with running in the Truck Series in the late 90s and early 2000s, and more so with having run the Mexico Series at this time. I didn't realize he was making Busch Series starts this late into 05.
I think he might have had a few more years he started races after this as well. But yeah, he ran Mexico City that year in this car. So
I knew he ran Mexico City because there was a lot of drivers that were like NASCAR Mexico drivers that were really excited to just have a big like a Busch race down there that were like, all right, we're going to enter the Busch race now. And I remembered Contreras was one of those, and they had Michel Jourdain was in that race. That was his for Adrian Fernandez. A lot of like IndyCar kart guys coming over. You ran some of that. Was really cool. NASCAR needs to get back to Mexico. IndyCar too. Everybody, they just need to go back to Mexico.
I think that's going to be a high, tall order. But yeah, it would be cool. It's a great circuit. And it's kind of like a couple of these tracks they go to. If Formula One goes to, great track, not the best location for it. If you could just kind of pick it up, I don't know. What I'm trying to think of the movie or TV show where they just kind of pick up the land and like move it somewhere else. I can't remember.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else.
Yeah, we could do that. We just need Patrick Starr, and it'll solve all our issues, right?
We just have to hope the circuit doesn't get crushed by an Alaskan bullworm.
Yes. Thank you, Rob.
There's an Alaskan bullworm in turn 4.
Did you see we're jumping ahead, but did you see the Drake and Josh reference picture that someone created? I will send it to you when we here in a second as you talk about Formula One, because that's what we're going to talk about here.
Now let's talk about Formula One
right now. Formula One was in Istanbul, Turkish Grand Prix. Rob, walk us through this because I did not get to watch this race. I just saw the results and a couple laps on the big screen at Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Well, you were having a lot of fun watching this race then. I was just in my pajamas at 8 a.m, crack of dawn, trying to wake myself up and trying to get my cat to stop meowing for food. But this one was interesting. So it was raining earlier in the day, early in the morning, and it kind of stopped raining by the time the race got underway. But it was still drizzling just a little bit. But the problem was there was so much humidity. It was all the humidity. It kept the track really damp. The track was not drying out as it should have, and it definitely seemed like that kind of played into how the rest of the race went. So let's talk about this a little bit here. It was too wet for slicks. First and foremost, we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about it being too wet for slicks here in a little bit, but it was almost too dry for intermediates. But because it's too wet for slicks, you kind of have no other option but to go on the inters. But that just means you're going to have a lot of intermediate graining and a lot of lost grip throughout those tires. And actually, if you've seen pictures, Josh, I don't know if you have seen the pictures of after the race, what those tires looked like. Yeah. The treads are just worn off of them completely. Entirely.
Yeah.
They became slicks. Over the course of their use. But full slicks were not permissible. But anyway, let's start with the start of the race. The start of the race was pretty clean, except for contact between Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso had qualified fifth in this race, and got taken out in the first corner. Now, they gave Gasly a 5-second penalty, and I talked about this with Josh a little bit before the show started, but I want to echo it here. I don't necessarily agree with this penalty. I think this was more of a racing incident and a deal. When I looked at the onboards, it definitely looked like Gasly was just plopped in between a rock and a hard place. I think he tried to give Alonso as much room as he could, but the problem was there was a car below him on the inside that it just came up out of nowhere and took the apex of the corner away. Not a lot Gasly can do if he wants to wreck himself. Unfortunately, he ended up having to make contact with Alonso and send Alonso around. I just felt like the time penalty was a bit unfair. I think it should have been more of a racing incident, especially since it didn't really affect Pierre all that much. He was able to serve the penalty under his pit stop, so it didn't really affect him. And even then, if he hadn't made a pit stop, let's say hypothetically didn't make a pit stop, it wouldn't have mattered because for the most part, he had a 5-second or more gap on the car and he was leading. So I just didn't see the reason for the penalty. I understood it, but I didn't see the reason for it. I felt like the stewards were being a little bit too harsh on Gasly there, but it didn't really affect much because the rest of the race was kind of It wasn't until pit stops started happening that stuff started to seem to get crazy. Because keep in mind, the track is still wet. The track is still damp. There's intermediates. It's basically been considered a wet race. I don't know if they declared it a wet race, but I think they did. It would have made sense if everybody started on inters. But that being said, you didn't have any DRS. And this Turkey track is perfect for DRS. And we didn't have it. So we had... It definitely seemed... And to combine that is you only have 2 sets of inters for the weekend. So you can only make one stop. Everybody had to do this race on one stop. There was one driver who did it on no stops. Almost were 2 drivers who did it on no stops. We'll get to those in a little bit. But that being said, everybody kind of had to conserve their tires throughout this race. And I think that also contributed to a lack of passing. So when we get to the pit stops, these pit stops start to come relatively late in the race. You start to see more and more drivers come in and make their pit stops. Some drivers were trying to do this race on no stops. Some drivers legitimately thought that they could. Lewis Hamilton was one of those. He thought he could make the race. He could go race distance on the used inters, the inters he started the race with. Now this is the second race in a row, basically, where we've had Hamilton kind of argue with Mercedes, and Mercedes obviously has the last lap. They put their foot down and they say, nope, Lewis, you're going to box this lap, whether you like it or not, whether you want to or not. We sign your paycheck at the end of the day. You're going to box this lap because we think it's going to be the best for you. Now, 2 weeks ago, at Sochi, it worked out because the rains came, Lando Norris was still on slicks, and that was that. This week, however, not so much. Actually, what ends up happening is Lewis Hamilton pitting did actually take him out of a podium position. Now, especially, and it's even more concerning when you look at how, Red Bull finished second and third. Now, Bottas won the race, but Red Bull still took points away from Mercedes' team championship, and Verstappen took back over the drivers' championship. So you have major points implications by Mercedes making this call to pit Lewis Hamilton pretty much against his wishes. Hamilton seemed like he was like, hey, this is kind of fun. Yeah, I'm sliding and slipping around a little bit, but it's fun to drive. And Hamilton seemed fairly confident with about 10 laps to go that he could go the full race distance without making a pit stop. Mercedes pulled him in, and that was that. Now, they pitted him for inters. Now, the reason why I'm talking about pitting him for inters was because Sebastian Vettel also pitted a little bit before Hamilton did. Now, Vettel pitted for whatever reason for slicks. Now, I don't know if this was a Vettel call or if this was an Aston Martin call. If this was an Aston Martin call, this might have been the dumbest call I've ever seen by a race team in my entire life, because Vettel was running top 10 in the points prior to that. He comes in, pits for slicks, and then ends up finishing like 16th or something. They had points. They pitted him for nobody. Now, keep in mind, nobody prior to that point had decided to pit for slicks. Nobody. Everybody who had pitted before took on a fresh set of intermediates. As soon as Vettel left that pit lane, he was like, oh dear, we screwed up.
And you mentioned that earlier, and I'm like, if no one has made, as soon as he enters the track, this is the moment Vettel realize he screwed up. If no one has made that yet, shame on them.
I don't know if they have, but man, I did not understand that logic. I felt like that was the dumbest move by Aston Martin because they threw away 2 cars in the points. Stroll finished in the points because they pitted him for inters. Vettel finished back with the Haas's because he pitted for slicks. And I understand trying to take a gamble. I understand that. But when nobody else is even considering going on slicks, everybody else is definitively going out on inters. The worst case scenario is you pit for inters, the track dries up, and then everybody else has to come in and pit for slicks. That's literally the worst case scenario. And they decided to somehow make it worse by pitting for slicks early, thinking, we're going to get the jump on everybody. No, the track never dried out. The track just never dried out. Now, want to note this here. So Hamilton was frustrated with the team for making that call. The question is would he have been able to go the distance while maintaining the position? Because we saw, I'll talk about this right now, might as well, because Esteban Ocon ran the entire race without pitting. The entire race. I retweeted pictures of what his tires looked like after the race. There is a giant freaking hole in the right front tire that is just blisters. Hamilton, the main thing was Hamilton was trying to stay in front of Perez. Hamilton was trying to stay in front of the Red Bulls. Hamilton's trying to get the most points as possible because Drivers' Championship, Teams Championship.
Right.
So I understand why Mercedes pitted him, because they wanted to make sure that they guaranteed themselves getting points. They didn't want to have like a tire failure or something and screwed up. But we saw that Ocon was able to actually go the full 58 laps on the same set of tires. So this leads my question is, understanding hindsight is 2020, you really have to look at the time that Hamilton was losing to the car behind. If Hamilton was losing maybe like a half a second a lap, pit him. If he's only losing maybe a tenth here and a tenth there, I don't really think Mercedes should have been pitting him if Hamilton felt he could have gone the distance. Because if anybody can conserve their tires for a full race distance, I'm probably going to think it's Hamilton.
Yeah.
He's got to be one of the best drivers at doing that, right? And maintaining position. Because they talked about Ferrari was talking about Leclerc. Leclerc was asking Ferrari, "Hey, can we stay out on these tires the whole race?" And they were like, "Yeah, if you could stay ahead of the second place car." Well, no, he couldn't. There's no way. Bottas got by him, and I think it was the same kind of deal with Hamilton. Mercedes must have looked at the data and been like, "Yeah, we'll leave you out here on this set of tires if you can stop losing half a second to the car behind every lap." You know what I mean? I'm not saying he was losing half a second, but clearly they must have seen something in front of them that said, we need to pit him now because he's gonna finish a lot worse if we don't pit him.
Right.
I don't have the data. I don't have that in front of me, but that's what I'm thinking. I understand Hamilton's frustration, but if the team has that data, the team needs to show him that data then. The team needs to go after the race and say, "Hey, look, here are your lap times before you pitted, and here's after you pitted.
Well, I would think
you were falling off at this rate before you pitted, and you were going to continue to fall off that rate unless you pitted."
I would think that would be part of the debrief. I would think
so too, but he still seemed very upset even after the race, even after when he went home.
Well,
but anyway, so Valtteri Bottas won this race.
Yeah.
This could have been his last race victory for Mercedes. Maybe not. We'll see what happens. There's still plenty of races to go in this season. The thing is, it's a great win for Bottas. I'm very happy for him. But really what this is all going to come down to is how important was that pit stop going to be in the grand scheme of things when we get to the last race of the year in Abu Dhabi. Because you look at how tight that championship is right now. The championship is swapping leads between Verstappen and Hamilton almost every race.
Right.
Hamilton giving up 2 positions for pitting. Let's say hypothetically he could have gone the whole distance and gotten a third. That's points all on the table that they left. Hindsight's going to be 2020, but It's definitely interesting to talk about at this point. So let's go ahead and move on to the Xfinity Series. Josh, I'm going to hand things back over to you because you were at this race, and I kind of want to hear about your experience and what you thought about this race in person from the Roval.
Yeah, well, first off, fantastic experience. I was glad to be asked by the communication staff there at Charlotte Motor Speedway to come back and help and kind of conclude that spring 2020 internship. I was supposed to be at the auto fair in April, the NHRA race in April, and a couple dirty events in May, and then conclude the Coca-Cola 600. So to do it here at the Roval was pretty cool. Saturday, not as busy as Sunday from a infield perspective and immediate perspective, but Rob, I'll tell you, you can go to a Roval and you can get into the infield. You can't stand if you're just a fan and a ticket holder. You can't stand on the bridge and just watch the race. You get on the bridge, go up. Got to get back onto the ground. But I had a pass. I was able to sit up there and stand. I'm like, this is cool. This is cool to watch. And then on Sunday, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but you could stand by if you had the right pass again. I think VIPs could be over there. I'm not sure, but you can stand by the fence right where they exit pit road, and if the fence was, they go out there and tap the car. That's how close you were. It was so cool. Really cool, really great experience. I didn't get to watch both races in its entirety, but it was really exciting. The parts I could see, the the one point I want to talk about, because I was watching it live on television when it happened, was the Balicki.
Oh gosh,
with the curb and the I'm gonna throw shade. The indie jokes that ran out. Like, all right, here, let's go review the film. What's not to do? It was.
I would be lying if I wasn't making the same comparisons at that time.
Okay, and they never replaced the curb. They just cut the bolts off, right? They just said, okay, screw it. Let's just keep going, right? Yeah, good call, because those were not needed at all. And I think there's a lot of points drivers brought up before this week. There's nowhere to escape unless you are on the front stretch and you overshoot that chicane on the front stretch. To make the right then left across the start finish line, you just go straight through the ball field of the front stretch. That's the only place you have any runoff. Well, I guess you have some in the before. I forget what turn it is. That long right hander in the infield. You have some grass there, but that's grass that's going to potentially rip up your splitter, right? There's nowhere to escape. I got a Watkins Glen or even a Road America and Circuit of the Americas. You don't have a lot of room to escape. So to take away that the driver's ability to escape, I don't understand NASCAR's idea with curbs right now. I guess if they miss it, you police it. And you can say, okay, you can either serve a pass through or you can do a stop and go, whichever one you want to do. And obviously, guys are going to choose a stop and go. I felt bad for Balicki because that was just an unnecessarily wrecked car. Kind of like what we saw at Indianapolis on the very first lap of the Xfinity race. So I feel bad for these Xfinity guys. They're the kind of the guinea pigs for the Cup team, for the Cup race, which it shouldn't be, even though I don't know. Rob, what was your thoughts about the race, the Xfinity race?
Xfinity race continues to deliver every single time. I was very impressed. I was very entertained overall by the race. Roval's fun. Roval's fun to watch. I love the Roval. I could talk about the Roval. Sometimes the thing about it is sometimes I can watch the Roval and I don't even care if the racing is kind of stale. I don't really care if there's not a lot of passing zones. I just really appreciate the hard work that Charlotte Motor Speedway did to creating this unique road course that really there's nothing like it.
No.
Because the thing they talked about it, they were talking about it a little bit in the broadcast. They were comparing the infield section to like a street course. I wouldn't go that far. A street course does not have as much elevation changes as that does. It is more like a straight up natural. The infield portion really feels like when I watch races at the Roval, I feel like I'm watching two races at once. I feel like I'm watching a road course race on the infield and an oval race when they get out of there, when they on the high banks. And I love that because it just creates so many different and unique challenges to the drivers and the teams that I don't think is present on any other type of race course. You look at the Indianapolis infield road course, that's flat. That is completely flat. And they don't use the banking anymore. So you take that element out of it. You look at maybe the Daytona road course. Well, I wouldn't say there's a lot of elevation changes in the infield section at Daytona. I would say it's challenging, but I wouldn't say it's as unique as the Roval. The Roval presents itself in this two-factor challenge where not only do you have to navigate blind corners and tight corners, but then you also have to make sure that your car can perform well on banking, going fast in straight line speed down the backstretch into the chicane. Now, you do that same kind of thing at Daytona, but there's more nuances, I think, at the Roval than there are at Daytona.
Agreed.
And when I watch the Xfinity race, you can really see the drivers who have this place down to a science and the drivers who are really still trying to figure out how to drive it. And I think that's interesting because even 4 years on, 4 years on of the Roval, we're seeing drivers still struggling to kind of figure it out. Even in an era of NASCAR where we're going to more and more road courses than ever, we're still seeing drivers struggle to nail the setup or nail the driving style that you need for the Roval. I mean, Allmendinger's perfect at it. Obviously, we could talk about that. We're talking about the Xfinity series, so we might as well talk about how Allmendinger dominated. I mean, he had one heck of a performance out there. That's a championship performance. We could talk about how Allmendinger's done in the Cup Series and one-offs, but it doesn't matter because in the Xfinity Series, that's what he's driving. That's his bread and butter. That's what he's got to do in order to nail this season. Man, he was killing. That was a championship-type performance that Allmendinger pulled off, and he schooled the field. There were late restarts there where, he took off. He had a 9-second lead. It got reduced after the restart, and he still took off and finished by about a second and a half. He only had 2 laps. It only took him 2 laps to gap the field by a second and a half. That dude had that track figured out, and that's what's so interesting about it is because it does provide that unique challenge that somebody like Allmendinger, who has the driving style that he does, where it's a really aggressive oval driver, but a really calm, cool, and collected road course driver, and he kind of mixes those two in when he races the Roval, where he kind of has semi-patience, semi-aggression, and it really is a winning combination for him, and that's what I kind of see when he does his driving style. Like, it's not like he's going to give up a position without a fight, like some other drivers would do in that situation. But at the same time, he knows when he needs to push and when he can't. And I was really just overall, I just love the Roval, so I have nothing negative to say about the Xfinity race, only positive things. The same goes for the Cup Series. I don't know. I really just am really thankful that we have a racetrack that is this unique on the NASCAR schedule, and I wonder what it would be like to see more than just NASCAR and GT cars tackle this. Because I'd like to see like world-class drivers like come over here and attempt like in IMSA, like with prototypes, or even, I hate to say it, but I'd actually even like to see IndyCar try it. It might be a far-fetched idea, it might be a pipe dream, but I'd like to see how other race drivers and race teams navigate this challenging, unique, beautiful racetrack in the Roval. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever seen before, and I just constantly praise it because Charlotte Motor Speedway did such a great job. I mean, you're down in Charlotte, so you saw it more than me, but that's how I feel on TV. What did you think about it in person?
Well, I don't know if I brought this up last year when we talked about the Roval race, but you can't understand the elevation changes until you're there on the ground. Like, you just can't see it. Even the difference in the banking in the it's like turn 2 portion, right where pit road and the race course come back together. Just how different that is. Just the elevation change there. You're right, spot on. There's just no elevation change in Indianapolis. I mean, the most elevation change you get is when you enter the south chute from the road course, and the cars just glitch a little bit up because there's banking. That's the elevation change in Indianapolis. Daytona, yes, you had the banking, just like the Charlotte Roval, but there's no elevation change really to speak of in the infield portion for the cars to tackle. And you're right, this Allmendinger and Chase Elliott have the Roval down. They have it down. They know what it's like a science. They are like, I'm going to go out there and compare this to Cars 3. And remember the simulator when you have, yes, I'm going to fold out Jackson Storm on there. They are Jackson Storm on the Charlotte Roval. They are hitting them that right apex. They're hitting their mark every time. They're not missing a downshift. They're hitting their braking points just right. They know what they're doing, and I feel like the rest of the field is playing catch-up because it is so challenging. And if you were to stand up there and watch, and you were to watch one car, I don't know if there's too many of them that you could say they hit the same mark every lap, or even this for several laps in a row. And that's, again, unless you talk about Allmendinger or Elliott, they have the whole sport has a lot of work to do, but that's what makes the race so challenging and the race so fun to watch. Is that this isn't going to another road course where like a Watkins Glen. Like Watkins Glen's a great race. I'm not knocking on Watkins Glen at all by any means, but it's a far simpler place to hit your marks and get your car set up right where you want to handle. Here, I'm not trying to be repetitive because you've hit on it, but yeah. There's so many little nuances to the Charlotte Roval that you have to get right, or there's so many you have to get right. And I'm not going to say Chase Elliott and AJ Allmendinger have all, let's say, 10 nuances figured out, but they have so many more figured out than the rest of the field that it's almost just not fair at this point.
That I like the most too is that the Roval is one of those tracks where you can't just copy and paste a setup from one road course to another. You can't take the Watkins Glen setup and apply it to the Roval. You can't take your Sonoma setup and apply it to the Roval. You can't take your Road America and your Coda setups and apply them to the Roval. It's its own independent thing. And I think that, in an era where NASCAR teams are so used to taking one setup and applying it to another track with certain tweaks because of the small amount, the testing bans. They can't test everywhere, so it's not like they could test on every track. You have to pick and choose your track that you're testing on, and you have to pick and choose which tracks have practice qualifying, whatever. I think a lot of people, they think, I'm not saying that they're stupid or anything. I'm not trying to say that someone with a degree in engineering is dumber than me with a journalism degree, but I think that they're trying to adapt a setup from one racetrack and apply it to the Roval, when in reality, the Roval, people just need to race there more to get more data to really figure out the right way to set up the cars for the track. I think we're still even 4 years in, there's a lot of teams and a lot of drivers that are still struggling to have that kind of, to get the right setup, get the right braking points, nail the right shifting points, all of that stuff. It's not just it's not just like simulator work that the drivers can do. It's work that the teams have to do collectively. And I really appreciate the Roval for giving that challenge back and putting that challenge, because it's one of the few races in NASCAR right now where I really feel like everybody's being tested to their limits. When you go to the Roval, yes, there's one or two drivers that nail it, but they're so far ahead in front of everybody else, it makes you think, man, everybody else is just playing catch up to these guys.
Yeah, I would say maybe that's what some of the strategy is right now at this point for some of these teams and drivers. I'm not good at road course racing. I need to be as comfortable as possible. I need to be able to say, I maybe we could go for 12th, but I'll settle for 15th and not be frustrated at the end of the day and not feel like I'm battling and pushing the car too hard and turn that 12th place that we're running for into an 18th. So let's settle for 15th. Not saying, I don't know if every team's doing that, but that could be because it is such a unique challenge. Like, I need to be as comfortable as possible. I like the Sonoma setup. Stick it in the car, and let's tweak it throughout the race if we can, to the best of our ability, because obviously there's going to be some things you can't change during the race.
Do you want to take the next 10, 12, 15 minutes to talk about the Cup Series and everything about that? Because we've kind of nailed our feelings on the Roval and everything, but let's talk about the Cup Series and more specifically towards the ending of that race.
Yeah. Okay. Let's. Yeah. There's a few points here. Let's talk about Harvick and Elliott, but without talking about NASCAR's involvement. Let's just talk about Harvick and Elliott right now. Mm-hmm. There's a point early in the race. I forget. I believe it was stage 2, maybe it might have been stage 1, but I think it was stage 2. Where Chase was passing Harvick into turn 1 and to enter the infield portion of the course. And Harvick gave him a bump. I'm like, hey, I forgot Bristol, buddy. And then later in the race, this is where I was when, quote unquote, the poop emoji hit the fan emoji. Okay? I'm picking up someone from the front, like outside the track, and all of a sudden I hear the crowd erupt. I'm like, that's not good. That's probably not good. That's not a good eruption at all. So my mind is like,
it means one of two things. Dale Jr. came back. Kyle Busch crashed. Or
that was actually, well, you got one of them. Like, okay, Kyle Busch just crashed or Chase Elliott just crashed. One of the two. And I go to my phone and I'm like, dun, dun, dun. I think the first person I saw, I think it was Jim Utter. It's like, I think it was Jim Utter tweeted and like, Harvick and Elliott got together. Then I saw a bunch of like eye emojis, double eye emojis. Like, whoa, that just happened. Which I love people who tweet that. That just happened. Like, what just happened? You got to context, buddy. But I guess if you're just like talk into your phone, I don't know. It definitely, it definitely looked like there might have been a little bit of don't forget Bristol on that one.
You think Harvick forgot? Kevin Harvick has feuded with so many drivers. You think this guy forgets anything?
Oh no, no, no. I don't think he forgets anything. I think he is one of the guys that. Well, I sat here, Rob, and I told you that wasn't the smartest move by Chase Elliott to go out there and park it in front of Kevin. It was going to come back to haunt him, and it just about did today or on Sunday. And I said to myself, did I call it or did I call it? You know, I called it. I called this. Now, as luck would have it, things went his way, and he is moving on to the round of 8. But before that, before we talk about that, there was a caution for Kevin Harvick. Rob, why don't you pull up your Twitter account and go to your direct messages? I sent you.
I just found it. Yeah.
Okay, you saw it.
I saw it, and I love it but I loved the one of everyone. Sorry if I'm getting ahead of you here, but I loved everyone saying, "Oh, he just hit L2. He just hit the intimidate button."
Yeah, I hadn't seen that one yet. That's so true, though.
That's exactly what I thought. I literally looked at that and I was like, "Dude, Chase Elliott just hit the intimidate button."
Yeah.
And
the cool thing is, I was watching this live. I was standing in the middle of AJ Allmendinger's pit box. His crew's gone. He's out of the race. Engine failure. I thought this was honestly going to be an Allmendinger Chase Elliott show, which I was waiting.
It was going to be until his engine failed.
Yes, so disappointing. But I was watching this and I'm going by and I'll see, Chase, Harvick, Chase, okay. And then all of a sudden I just see smoke from the 4 and he ran into the wall. All the meanwhile, these photographers are standing beside me. They're looking towards the infield chicane, and I go, "Hey, buddy, you're going to want to look over there." And I said, Harvick just went straight into the wall. And they're all thinking, "Oh, did Chase just dump him?" Like, Chase didn't touch him. But you know what he did? He was mirror driving, and he just like, "Oh, crap." Yeah. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know if anyone asked Harvick or was ballsy enough to ask Harvick, "Hey, were you
I think we can all assume that we knew he saw the 9 in his rearview mirror. He was more focused on the 9. He missed his braking point and hit the wall. That's
did we ever hear?
Really, no. I mean, because there wasn't any indication of a flat tire, of brake issues. None of that. He looked in the mirror, saw the 9, freaked out. Missed his braking point and slammed the wall.
Did anyone ever hear Tim Fetal radio? If he told him if the 9 was behind him? I never heard it.
I imagine he had to have let him know, because if you're in a situation like that and you know someone is coming, I mean, Chase Elliott said over the radio that he was gonna dump the 4.
Yeah, I mean, you heard the conversation between Gustafson, Elliott, and DeHaan. And like they all go, "Yep, it's on. It's on."
Yeah, he's going to wreck the 4, so it's not like Tim Fetal was not going to relay this to Harvick.
No. Okay, so let me ask you this, Rob. Let's presume Harvick dumped Chase. Okay, let's just presume that. He dumped him. Is what he did eye for an eye for Bristol, or did he escalate it?
I think, man, that's tough. That's a tough question. I think he escalated it, because I don't think it is eye for an eye. I don't think eye for an eye ever works out, especially in NASCAR. I mean, very few times do you see feuds like that, and it usually takes an off season or a trip to the NASCAR hauler to end stuff like that.
And we'll talk about that later.
So I think Chase Chase, this is how I'm going to feel. I feel like Chase, and forgive me for using this terminology, but I can't think of any other type of terminology to use.
Okay.
So hide your kids for a minute or do whatever. But I think Chase honestly feels blue-balled by Harvick wrecking himself. Like, I honest to God think this. He's got to be sitting there thinking, he spent the whole rest of his race after that contact with Harvick, getting in the wall, he spent the whole rest of that race passing cars after car after car, waiting to get to the four. And there was no payoff. He didn't even get to touch him before Harvick wrecked. If I'm Chase Elliott, I'm like, dude, this doesn't solve anything. This doesn't say anything. I didn't get my revenge. He just wrecked himself. That's not revenge for me. He wrecked himself. Chase is going to put Harvick in the wall at Martinsville. I guarantee you that.
Well, I do think it was an escalation on Harvick's part, but I don't know. I would kind of get a little. Again, we will never know what actually happened inside the 4-car, in entering turn 1. But here's what we can know: Chase can take home and take all the credit. I'm taking credit for that. I caused that. He was so scared. He didn't let me get to him. He did the work for me. I didn't have to touch him. I didn't have to damage my car any more than it was. Because, yeah, I think it was an escalation. But I'm not going to repeat what she said, which is gold, by the way. If you can find an outlet that will print that, that'd be great. Or just post that. I'm sure you can find one that will post it online, but printing it might be difficult. But yeah, I love what he said. I hope he has a merry off season and a happy Christmas. I mean, I saw him get out of the car, and I was like, I could tell, like, he was a little relieved, and then he was just like, I can't believe I just did that. I think he was kind of a little surprised himself too that he was moving on, because there was a point there where with William leading, he wasn't going to move on.
And Harvick would have.
Well, no, there was a point where
before Harvick wrecked himself, there was a legitimate chance, briefly, in the points as they run, that if William Byron was ahead, that if Harvick had not wrecked and Byron won that race, Chase would have been done. And
there was a point too where they were both below the line.
Yes, the points changed everywhere, almost every lap that race.
Well, Chase Elliott was rooting for Tyler Reddick to get past William Byron, because then all Chase had to do was get just a couple spots instead of like 10 spots on track. Just crazy how that played out. Let's save the bumper for later. We'll talk about that later in the show. But I guess I'll just wrap up my experience here real quick. Rob, I had so much fun there. Again, I want to express to them. I even made a trip to the infield care center because post race I cut my finger, so I got a trip from the senior vice president of communications. Scott Cooper gave me a ride to the infield care center. It's an okay cut. I don't think it needs stitches. I really don't think it needs stitches, but yeah, it was a great experience. Had fun down there. It was nice to get a taste of, like, from kind of the other side of what I experienced in 2018 at the Indianapolis 500. The coolest part, I think, for me this weekend, and I had the essential pass. You kind of go somewhere until they tell you to move, kind of deal. It's kind of the philosophy. And did you see where Brad Keselowski was pitting? Did you see, like, he was like right beside a garage entrance?
I didn't see where he pitted, but I believe it.
Okay, so he was right beside a garage entrance. Well, I'm standing there right at the end of the wall, and I'm filming there. So I was right there as the car went by, just for a few minutes, because I saw people going a little crazy in the 2 pit, and I didn't know what was going on. So I parked myself right there. There's NBC guys there, 2 NASCAR officials. No one said anything to me. I'm like, until they tell me to move. It was cool. But yeah, it was a very cool experience. So again, thank you everyone at Strelmar Speedway for the opportunity. Hope to go back and do it again if I'm in the position to do so. Rob, that was ROVAL. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. There's a few more points to hit up here. Weekend wrap up. Let's shoot that, and let's get into the outstanding performance.
IMSA was at VIR. That was actually pretty cool because it happened. It was on NBC like right before the Xfinity race.
Yeah, it was
also on NBC. That's pretty neat and good on NBC for this. This kind of makes me wonder: did we ever really need NBCSN if we're just capable of shoving everything onto NBC? Did we? Really
I don't know. I don't know what the NBC line was. Notre Dame playing on Saturday at home.
Well, they were, but they were on the ACC network because they were playing Virginia Tech.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, that's why. That's probably why.
Well, yeah, of course, but
yeah,
kind of makes you wonder why we ever had this.
I know what you mean.
Like they're just getting rid of it, and it's like, okay, so you could have just put things on NBC this whole time. You just chose not to.
What time was the football game?
Football game was like at 7. The Notre Dame game.
Oh, heck, they could have started the. I mean, it stinks for sports cars, but they could have started the sports car race like at 11. That was over like at what? That could have been over at 2, and then you could have had the Xfinity race going by 2:30. It had like pre-race and all that on NBCSN. Move over to the race on NBC. Instead, it still had change to go to the football game if it theoretically was on NBC that day. I mean, there you go.
I don't know. But I like this. I like being able to just tune in because it was nice because I was actually the college football on Saturday was pretty slim pickings. I know you weren't. You were at the race, so you had a lot more fun doing that. I'm sitting here like, dude, I gotta find something to watch, and all of it was like blowout. I hate college football sometimes because you go through and you flip. I don't get Pac-12. I prefer watching Pac-12 football, but I don't get Pac-12 network, so I gotta look through all of them, and I keep channel surfing, and I'm like, this one's a blowout. It's 52-0. Okay, 36-7. Okay, all of them are just complete blowouts, and you're trying to find the one game that's good, and then you find one that's good, and then you realize I don't care about either of these teams. What? I don't know any of these players. I don't care. So I was like, thankfully, we have something else to watch. This nice little race on NBC.
I couldn't tell you who was playing on college football. I don't pay attention to college football, so I just like
to watch it on Saturdays because it's something cool. I like football being on from noon to basically the time I go to bed at like 3:00, especially if there's some really late Mountain West stuff or Hawaii starts playing a game at like 7:00 local time, which is really like 11 or 12 o'clock here.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh boy, I need to watch a game that's live at 2 a.m. I'm the only person in the world that's excited for this. Anyway, let's talk about some IMSA. They were at VIR, and it was just it was a GT challenge race. So just the GT cars were there. GTLM, Corvette Racing won. Nick Tandy, Tony Milner, GTD. This was a very interesting one. You had Will Alberlin. I think it was a driver who spun with one of the Corvettes, and it caught a tire very late in the race. Like there was under 20 minutes to go, I think, and it shot their entire championship. That one little mistake. They were leading the race. They were going with the BMW. They were going to lead the race, and they collided with a GTD car or a GTLM car, and that was it. But anyway, in GTD, Pfaff Motorsports ended up winning. Zachary Robicon and Lawrence Vanthor were the victors there. So IMSA at VAR. That was really the only major race. There was some feeder series races that happened, but outside of that,
I was hoping you were going to add stuff to there, but I mean, like, okay.
I didn't have any. I mean, there was, like I said, there was a few feeder series races, but I can't say I watched them.
Okay.
I was busy doing other stuff, so I didn't have a chance to watch them like usually. Because usually when I watch those things, because I'm already up, because I was trying to watch F2 or F3.
Yeah.
But if I'm not already up, like I'm not going to watch them. I might watch them later, but not live. So yeah. I do like them. Don't get me wrong. I love watching feeder series, but when they're all on YouTube, it's kind of a hassle. But anyway, let's move on to the outstanding performance.
Yeah, Rob, you picked a guy who, did come from nowhere and looked pretty happy to be where he was at. Who'd you pick?
Yeah, how can you not? I just had to pick Chris Buescher because he surprised. I watched the whole Roval race, and at the very end of the race, I'm like, the 17's on the lead lap. This is for position. He's in third. He could get second. What is going on here? Man, Chris Buescher had probably one of the best road course performances of his career. Definitely a very promising result there out of the 17. I just Great job, Chris Buescher. He's had a mediocre season. Roush in general has been mediocre the past couple of seasons. But this has been great for him. Great run for him. He was taking it to him. He looked like there were points there where he probably could have gotten Reddick, but I don't think he did. Just he was saving his stuff. Didn't want to risk anything. Just take the top 3 and go home happy. Take the points and go home. And Reddick, I was almost going to give it to Reddick too, because Reddick looked really good out there. I mean, man, I love it when Reddick runs well because it just makes you feel good. It's like, all right, the Xfinity series is working, and RCR isn't a complete back marker. This is great. I love it. But in general, I got to give mine to Chris Buescher because he was the one that surprised me the most with just having an outstanding performance all in the Cup Series, coming home, finishing third on a road course. I don't know him necessarily as a road course ringer, so it's really cool to see him go out there and grab a third place.
It was his first top 5 of the year because I was standing there. He said, one of the guys at the track, Aaron Burns, said, "Hey, we're going to interview the second and third place guy at the bullpen there on the pit road." So I'm quickly gathering up some notes on my phone real quick about something, and then all of a sudden William Byron drops out like, crap, gotta find something on Busch here real quick. And it was his second top 5 on a road course. And I think it was his first top 5 of the year too, which was a shocker to see. I'm like, he hasn't finished in the top 5 yet this year. He's had so many good runs earlier in the year, and he hadn't been there. But anyways, mine is Matt DiBenedetto. Simply for the fact that he is running well on these road courses. And Sunday was another example of why, if you can't find a full-time ride, if you need a road course ringer, give Matty D a call. Because he seems to find his way to the top 10 by the end of the race. And, that's not an easy thing to do. Chase Elliott, AJ Allmendinger, Kyle Larson this year, they're making it look easy, but it's not an easy thing to do to find yourself consistently in the top 10 or flirting for a top 10 finish, maybe even a top 5 finish, because he did finish 6th, so he almost got top 5 if someone else had another issue. So, yeah, just because of that, we obviously don't know where he's landing next year. If he's going to be anywhere, we hope he's in the Cup Series next year, and if he's not there, we hope he's in a competitive ride, competing for wins, competing for championships, because he's a personality and a guy who, we all like. The fans like him, so that would be my pick for a road course ringer if you need one. On to the upshift, downshift segment. Now we can talk about a few other points that we didn't discuss earlier in the show. Upshift, we agree. Downshift, we disagree. We can throw it into the neutral if we just don't have enough information to make a definitive decision on, or if we'd like to do both. It's kind of like you're sitting at 0, you add 1, you minus 1, you're going to be at 0 again, that type of deal. Neutral we go. First question here. NASCAR's plan for the 2022 Cup Series package is 650 horsepower, 670 horsepower with high downforce, an 8-inch spoiler. I'm sorry, I'm going to restart this. I am all confused already. I am trying to do this off memory. NASCAR's plan for the 2022 Cup Series package is 670 horsepower, that's low downforce, 4-inch spoiler on road courses and short tracks, 550 horsepower with high downforce on intermediates, 8-inch spoiler, and the super speedways will be determined, have not been determined at this time. They're going to make the final decisions in January at the test of Daytona. So do you upshift or downshift the direction that they're going next year, Rob?
Can't really say it's positive or negative right now. I think it's too soon to tell. I'm trying to be open-minded. This is the thing. Like, with stuff like this that I usually feel one way or the other on, like high downforce and stuff like that, and low horsepower, I made it very clear I hate that. I hate high downforce. I hate low horsepower. But I hate it in this current car. And I think I've read a lot of things, and I've kind of listened to a lot of other people, and I've kind of just been like, they're right. This car is very different. So maybe high downforce and low horsepower is going to be fine in this car. Maybe it'll be fine in this car. Maybe the way this car works, maybe the cars will still slide around. Maybe it'll put more, wear on the tires. Maybe it'll still be a challenge to drive. Maybe they won't be full throttle all the way through the turns at an intermediate. I don't know. I really don't have the data. I haven't seen any tests, at least, of that would indicate something like that. I believe I heard someone say that they were going full throttle at an intermediate. I don't know. I take that with a grain of salt. All I know is that these cars are faster, which is not a bad thing. I'm all down for faster cars, faster lap times. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna the jury's still out. I think it's gonna be really tough. I'm really not gonna know until we get to that first intermediate race at Las Vegas. I really think that. There's too, this car is just too new. It's not like the Gen 6 where it was kind of like the car of tomorrow, except it was a new body style. This is entirely different. Like, we're talking new engine, new exhaust, new underbody, new chassis in general. I mean, everything about this car is different. It is so radically different than what we have right now that I just think it's too soon to tell. Knee-jerk first reaction, gut reaction is like, oh God, no, why low horsepower, high downforce? But again, I think I'm going to have to stay neutral here just because I haven't seen how this car races yet. If this car turns out to race the exact same, then it's a downshift. If the car ends up racing better and the low horsepower and the high downforce doesn't really make all that much of a difference, great, upshift. But right now I think it's too soon to tell, and I got to go neutral.
I know I'm neutral as well in this. It is too soon to tell. But I did see Bob Pockrass did tweet today. This is Monday. This is a Tuesday morning at 1:31 a.m. But he tweeted on Monday, you're listening to this maybe on Wednesday, that Martin Truex Jr. was over a second and a half slower today at the Roval test, his fastest lap than his fastest lap in Sunday's race. And I think the new engines are coming out like in a year or two, like 24 maybe, they're hoping, like the complete new engine. But I agree, you just don't know. And listening to the owners of the new team entering the series, this cars are run a lot like a European car and are designed in like a lot like European car. So that's obviously something radically different compared to what we've had. So you just don't know. You just don't know. I mean, yeah, if you're looking at the surface, like you said, I don't like what I'm seeing. We're seeing less horsepower. But again, I'm one of those people who are of the belief that if you ran the low downforce with the 550, you get a better race. I don't know. I don't think horsepower is all there. Of course, yeah, we would love to see more horsepower, but as long as, to me, you're not full throttle around a track other than Daytona and Talladega, I think you're doing good. I think it's good. You got to use the brake, work the throttle, burp it, you're good to go. Next question. Chase Elliott, being a high-profile driver and the sport's most popular driver, did not contribute to him not receiving a black flag in Sunday's race at the Roval for his rear bumper panel flapping around. Do you upshift or downshift?
Look, a lot of people love to say NASCAR's got a bunch of conspiracy theories about them. But Bob Pockrass tweeted it out and kind of debunked everything by saying, hey, NASCAR is like, yeah, this is okay now. I'm like, okay, well, if they're going to be consistent, then they're going to be consistent. I don't know. I don't know enough about the situation. I didn't think a lot of it when it happened, to be honest with you. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'd be honest with you, this being a controversy kind of took me by surprise. I was kind of surprised that this is a big deal. I'm just surprised. To me, I don't care. I mean, it doesn't really, I mean, did it affect the outcome of the race?
A little bit.
Would throwing a caution have affected the outcome of the race?
I think it helped Chase. It helped Chase because there was probably going to come a point where he was going to have to pit, and if it came under green, that was going to seal his playoff fate. So he was going around there, running around. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, please NASCAR, interrupt me because I'm not exactly fully aware of the whole situation. I don't exactly understand the whole controversy because this is all relative. I think
the controversy comes from it's Chase Elliott fans and everyone else. Everyone else is just like, well, NASCAR is favoring him because they want him to be in the round of 8 because they want him to be in the championship 4 because he is the most popular driver, right? They want him to win a championship.
If that's the case, then Bill Elliott would have won a hell of a lot more races in the McDonald's car.
And so would have Junior.
Dale Jr. would have won a hell of a lot more races. Dale Jr. wouldn't have been fined for saying the S word live on television. Or at least not, he would have been fined, but maybe not dock points.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you Danica Patrick would have won at least 2 races. I could probably guarantee you that probably bet you that Casey Kane would have won more races here or there. Probably would have won a championship. Probably would have ran better with Hendrick. Let me think. I could just think of all these other possible conspiracy theories. Theories.
And there's more
possible.
There's a laundry list of things that
are debunked. NASCAR is not black flagging Chase Elliott because they won him in the playoffs.
Well, Scott Miller gave his reasoning on SiriusXM NASCAR radio, saying that look, it's not a speedway, all right. So at that point, we're going slower speeds. Yeah, you have a faster speed section there through Oval Turn 1 onto the back stretch, and then a little through Oval Turn 3 onto the front stretch, but you're not going fast the entire time, and he wasn't in a pack of cars.
People drop debris at road course races all the time. Yeah, and they shouldn't get black flagged for something like that when you could just have a marshal go out when there's nobody on the track and pick up the debris and run off the track.
I don't. That's not the NASCAR way to do that.
I know it's not the NASCAR way, but I don't think that something like that warrants a black flag.
Well, they also don't have local yellows either, so you had to have local yellows to have marshals run on the field.
Did they really have local yellows? I thought they didn't have local yellow, like in the same sense that we do, but I thought like they, at the very least, did they? I guess you're right. I don't know why I've never.
It's a full or not.
Wow, I guess you're right. But I never really thought. I always thought because I don't know why. I don't know why I thought NASCAR at least had a local yellow. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe it's just because it appeared that way. But now, for road course incident, I don't know why I thought. You're right. I don't know.
This was okay at this track in this situation. If this is the Charlotte Oval, this is the 600. He's going to get the black flag because you can't have that going around there. Cars are going to come over approach with that debris a lot quicker. Next question. Speaking of which, NASCAR's Scott Miller told SiriusXM NASCAR that that the plan is to meet with Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick over the events at the Roval. NASCAR needs to interfere in the Chase Elliott-Kevin Harvick feud. Do you upshift or downshift?
All right, this is tough because on the one hand, I think that the Elliott-Harvick feud is one of the few things that's going to get me through the next couple of weeks, having to watch Texas and Kansas back to back. I'll be honest with you, I'm not looking forward to that. After we just got Talladega, we got the Roval, and then we go to Texas and Kansas. It's kind of like, oh, wow, this is a buzzkill. But anyway, so I don't want him to interfere because I, at the very least, want there to be some kind of interesting thing happening on the track. I want the commentators to say, hey, the 4 and the 9 are right next to each other. You know they're not going to wreck each other because it's a speedway, but hey, hey, these guys have history. But, I think ultimately the thing about it is they're going to have to interfere because you don't want to have a Kenseth Logano situation. Now, because now Harvick is... I don't want to say Harvick is looking for revenge, but Harvick has nothing to lose now. Chase has everything to lose. So Harvick's probably going to take a hell of a lot more risks. So if you want my opinion, I think they should talk to Harvick a little bit more than they need to talk to Chase. Chase is done. Chase has probably got his revenge. He's moved on. He's in the playoffs. If anything, they got to make sure Harvick doesn't do anything stupid because Harvick's got nothing to lose, and Harvick's not afraid of Chase.
I upshift and downshift on this one. One, you don't want the Kenseth Logano deal. Okay, you don't want that to happen again, where
Kenseth directly affected where a
malicious intent affects the outcome of a championship. We could go back and we talked about it at Bristol. How malicious was Chase going out there? How did he manipulate the race? Right. To me, that is nothing compared to intentionally wrecking a guy, intentionally dumping a guy, spinning a guy. Even if you spin the guy and he doesn't wreck or hit anything, that's track position loss, tires you got pit when where people don't have to, right? I just don't. We just don't need to look like a circus out here. And
NASCAR doesn't seem to have a lot of problems doing that.
Yeah, lately. I mean, you already have people. You have drivers on social media. Graham Rahal was one of them I saw who tweeted about it. Well, I believe quote tweeted Jeff Gluck. But that the playoffs don't reward necessarily the top person, and this is what you get. When everything's on the line in an elimination race, you're going to use the bumper more, right? We just don't need to look like a bunch of hooligans. So in that regard, NASCAR needs to sit down and talk about these guys and I don't know who that figurehead is. You kind of don't have a Bill France guy to me who's
or
going
Mike Helton.
I
would be more afraid getting Mike Helton to talk to me than whoever they got in there now.
I would sit them down and say, look, all right, Kevin, you tried. And for a while there, you succeeded. Chase, you need to take that he ran through the first corner and hit the wall as a win in your payback. It's over now. And if you want to go the route of Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Bodine and say, if you two touch each other, we're going to black flag you or we're going to hold you a lap on pit road. If you want, because honestly, you again, my whole thing is you just don't want this to turn into a circus. You don't want there to be a full-scale riot of Chase fans, and all of a sudden you have the non-Chase fans and the Chase fans.
Let's please not repeat what it was like to be a Kyle Busch fan in the late 2000s, please, because that was hell. I don't know why I decided to do it for a while. Maybe because I'm just a jerk who likes to be on the opposite side of things. Maybe I'm just Skip Bayless's long-lost son. I don't know. But the point is, let's not have that happen again. Because there's a lot of Harvick fans, there's a lot of Chase fans, and the last thing you want to have is them beating the hell out of each other in the grandstands.
Yeah, you don't need that. We don't need to be the Oakland Coliseum of racing, folks. We don't need it. Last question here. The Charlotte Roval is best situated as a playoff elimination race. Do you upshift or downshift?
If we're going to have these playoffs, we're going to end it like this, as goofy as possible, go for it. I love chaos sometimes.
If it's not, to me, I like it as an elimination race, so I do upshift. The only other place I would put it, I like it where it is now. The elimination race for a round of 12, much more than I'd like it for the round of 16. I like that it's in the middle of the playoffs. If it weren't an elimination race, I would put it as the first race in the round of 8. That's the only other place I'd put it. I love where it's at right now. I like that it's an elimination race. Again, not to say, okay, it's a place you can use the bumper the right way. It's a place you can use the bumper, so I like it. That's it for upshift, downshift. We take a couple points there that we didn't hit earlier. Hope you enjoyed us. Remember, you can play along. You can also let us know, Rob, your spot. I'll agree with you 100%. Josh, you're a complete dummy. I don't know what you're talking about. You can.
People would be calling me the dummy, I think.
I feel like I've said some dumb stuff on here too. So, or I've had a take where I'm like, I'm over here by myself. I'm the only guy in the stands over here. But let's go ahead and move on to the basically the last segment of the show here. It's Rollers featured Racetrack this week. So I'm a podcast listener. Shocker. I know. Shocker. I'm making a podcast. I'm a podcast listener. And one of my favorite podcasts is the F1 Beyond the Grid podcast presented by Tom Clarkson. I recently listened to the episode where Tom interviewed Derek Hill, Phil Hill's son. Now, Phil was the first American to win the Formula One World Championship in 1961, but he raced in several different races across the globe in forms of racing. One of these races was a sports car race called the Targa Florio. I'd heard this name in passing in previous podcasts and videos, but never really investigated and looked deeper into it until now. So without further interruptions, here's a very brief snippet of a lost sports car race, the Targa Florio. So the story begins with a man named Florio, Vincenzo Florio. He loved to travel, and one day, while in Paris, he came across a Dion Motors tricycle. he purchased it and shipped it back home to Sicily. Once gasoline arrived, because there wasn't any gasoline on Sicily when they first got there, he drove around before finally he actually became bored. He wanted to organize a race, but no one else owned a motorized vehicle, so a handicap race between a horse, and a cyclist was organized. So this, it's one of those deals where the cyclist goes first, I think, and then I'm guessing he went second, and then the horse was next. So the handicap, all right, you go, now you go.
So man versus horse versus machine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly right. And the cyclist dropped out. He got cramps. And the horse later won in what might have been the last win for horse versus machine, after Florio's engine overheated while he was in the lead. Following a victory in a speed trial in Padura, in a rebuilt Panhard that new friend Felice Nazaro constructed, Florio prepared to travel to Paris for the infamous 1903 Paris to Madrid race, but his older brother conspired to prevent this. They were from a wealthy, powerful family in Sicily. It may have saved Florio's life because the race was ended short due to deaths of drivers and spectators, including Renault brother Marcel. Florio then entered the next race at Brescia, Italy, where he finished third. He was then deemed of age and no longer was the responsibility of his brother, so he could go wherever the heck he wanted and enter whatever race he wanted to enter in. He would enter the Kaiser Prix, the first French Grand Prix, and then the Gordon Bennett Cup. In 1905, Vincenzo Florio was asked why there wasn't a race in Sicily, and he responded because they didn't have any roads. When he returned home, his associates convinced him that a proper road could be constructed in Sicily. He then commissioned a jeweler to craft a Targa, Italian, for plaque or plate, that would be awarded to the winner of the race. 30,000 lire would be the first prize cash money, 10,000 for second, and 5,000 for third. Could you imagine? That's quite a bit of money back in 1905. The first running was in 1906, a single lap around the east side of Palmaro, and was 92 miles in length. So single lap, 92 miles. That's still quite a little distance back then. This race took survival to the extreme, even for racing, because racing would become quite literally just survival. And this was very much an interesting twist because bandits were lined up along the countryside. Bandits. And then, not to mention, apparently there were some wolves that might want to feast upon an unfortunate driver if you were to become stranded. Then there were the cliffs around hairpin curves. And then you had the drastic elevation change from 30 feet above sea level to 3,300 feet. I mean, crazy. You talk about survival. That's his guts. The first race was on May 6, 1906. Only 10 cars made it to the starting line because of a strike and delay in the docks back in France. The race was open to standard or production cars, of which 10 had to be built. There was even a husband and wife team where the wife served as a mechanic. No record of if the marriage lasted beyond the race exists. Sorry, I had to throw that little nugget in there. And the race itself was 3 laps long. The first car left the starting line at 6 a.m. After 9 hours, Alessandro Cagno won with an average speed of 29.06 miles per hour. So that's just coasting in a little Sunday drive around downtown, small town America. In 19
get eaten by a modern day lawnmower. I'll guarantee you that.
You might be right. Especially some of those
all stock parts too. On the lawnmower.
I can believe that. You ever seen some of those zero turn mowers? Zoom. In 1907, 45 cars started the 3-lap, 277-kilometer race. The fourth running in 1909 was nearly canceled after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck near the city of Messina the previous December. Over 90% of the structures were destroyed, and a 30-foot tsunami struck nearby coast. The event has an estimated 75 to 82,000 people died in this disaster. Despite this, Florio said the race must go on, and it did, but was only a single lap. By the mid-1920s, Targa Florio was one of Europe's most important races, as the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Mille Miglia had yet to be established. In 1926, Eliska Junkova became the first female driver. As I mentioned, there was a wife earlier. She became the first female driver to compete in the race and is regarded as one of the great female racers of her time. In 1932, the Piccolo course was used for the first time because a road connecting, I'm going to butcher these town names, Catauventuro and Colasano was completed. I feel like that's solid Italian. This was, by the way, this was by order of Benito Mussolini, by request of Florio himself. So, I mean, that just kind of shows you the stature that Florio had in Italy. That he can go, hey, Benito, I need a bridge. I need a bridge built. I need a road built. Can you help me out? Sure. All right, so this is a good time to talk about the circuit used in their links here. So, again, as I mentioned, my Italian not existed here, so I'm not going to ramble on Italian town after Italian town here. So, sorry, Italian Robin Roller fans. I'm not going to try and butcher any more than I have to here. So, the first circuit used from 1906 to 1911 was the Grand Circuit at 146 kilometers in length. From 1912 to 1914, the Island Tour short circuit was used. And it was 979 kilometers in length. The race was only one lap long on that course, however. The race was not contested from 1915 to 1918 due to World War I. The media circuit was used from 1919 to 1930 and was 108 kilometers in length and varied from 4 to 5 laps. That was the duration of the race. In 1931, the Grande Circuit was used one final time. From 1932 to 1936, the Piccolo Circuit was used and was 2 to 8 laps in length, and again, 72 kilometers long. A demise in popularity and prestige by 1937 led to the race being moved to a 5.26 kilometer course in Favorita Park in Palermo. The race was held there until 1940. Again, if you know your history, you know what happened the next that kind of year. Later that year, World War II broke out, so no racing was contested from 1941 to 1947. And again, reconstruction a few years after the war ended. When racing returned in 1948 and through 1950, the race was once again one lap long and used the Island Tour course, 1,080 kilometers long. Then from 1951 to 1977, spoiler alert, the final year that the Targa Florio was run, it used the Piccolo circuit once again. From 1955 to 1973, the race was part of the World Sports Car Championship. So it held, world championship tour status. But as the 1960s progressed into the 70s, safety of the Targa Florio was a concern. Spectators were often too close to the track. I mean, you watch rallying racing today, you think those people are nuts. It's exactly what was going on here. And there were 2 specific incidents with fatalities that led the FIA to announce that the Targa Florio would lose its world championship status following the 1973 running. The roads in the town, these cars ran through the middle of towns, folks. They ran through the middle of towns and just roads that made Le Mans look like Daytona. I mean, that was the situation here. They were no longer suitable for the modern racing cars of the time. 76 cars made the start in the final race. Herbert Mueller and Gilles Van Lip won what many consider to be the last true Targa Florio in a Porsche 911 Carrera RSR. Now, the race did continue another 4 years, as if you can do your math, 1977, as I mentioned a few moments ago, it did continue for another 4 years as a national event until a fatal incident involving 2 spectators and injuries to 5 others, including the driver, finally brought an end to all the racing there. Local support for the race is why many credit it surviving 20 years longer than his famous cousin, the Miglia. Locals proposed a permanent course in their attempt to save the race. Supposedly, it was about a 6.6 kilometer course and embodied the 72 kilometer Piccolo circuit, but obviously much more on a smaller scale. So they were trying to say, hey, let's recreate this, let's dumb it down. But you're talking 1/12 of the length. This was not a very popular move, or when it was not a well-received idea. David Owen in Automobile Quarterly declared, if we must lose the Targa Florio, then let us do it gracefully and not reduce it to some comparatively minor close circuit event with the same name, as some have suggested. And so, the Targa Florio has not been run since then. It's kind of crazy when you look at some of the pictures of the cars, especially in its later years. It's just like, wow, this is still going on. The only thing I can compare it to, Rob, and you may think, you may have another rally. I'm not very familiar with rally racing, but the only thing I can compare it to is like Monaco. And the only we obviously know the reasons Monaco exists and still is around. I mean, you were to propose Monaco today, you'd be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. There's no way. But there's a lot more to read about this, and I found this one site that just went through like each year and said a few things about it. And there's no way I could have included everything just from that on here. I encourage you, if you want to know about a defunct race that held a lot of prestige to a lot of guys who did race in Formula One at the times, because back then they only ran like 8 races a year, and it was made at September, October timeframe. There had to be other races for them to fill up the rest of their calendar, and this was one of them that they ran typically in the early months of the year. So that was Roller's featured race / racetrack. It's kind of a combo deal there. I kind of, one of these days, if I ever go to Italy, if I ever can get an international driver's license, might want to drive this. Drive the circuit, the Piccolo circuit, not the 1,000-kilometer one. That'd be crazy. So, Rob, if you got nothing else to add, I think it's time to go. What's in the windshield here? All right. So he's nodding at me. He said, "Josh, hurry up! I'm ready to go to bed." Is what his eyes said there. I'm kidding, folks. I'm kidding. So in 2 weeks' time, Formula One returns to the United States for what, a sellout crowd at Circuit of the Americas. It's been 2 very long years since F1 has traveled to the States here. That race is on October 24th, the same weekend as Kansas Speedway, so not a conflict with Texas this time around. Texas is this weekend. Spoiler alert. Super Formula holds their penultimate race of the season at Twin Ring Motegi. That will be this upcoming Sunday morning at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on motorsport.tv. I get that right, Rob? Motorsport.tv? Yes,
absolutely.
All right. The 2021 WeatherTech Sports Car Championship concludes on November 13th. That's a week after the weekend following the conclusion of the NASCAR season. At Road Atlanta for the Petit Le Mans. I'm going to try and watch that race. If I'm off at it, actually, I should have that day off. No, I'll be working that day. So that's a kind of a bummer. Oh well.
You can watch the end of the race at least.
I might be able to. Yeah. What time did the race start?
It's 1,000 kilometers or 12 hours, whatever comes first.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be off in time to watch the end of it. Hopefully.
You're not working a 12-hour shift, right?
I shouldn't be.
So
I say that
you'll at least be able to get to see some portion of it, right?
A portion of it. All right. I'm going to hope for. Everything goes smooth at work always. It doesn't always go smooth at work. All right, last point here. NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series. All right, Texas Motor Speedway this Saturday and Sunday. The Camping World Truck Series. Whew. They don't return until Martinsville. That's still 2 weeks away. I don't like them having this big break here.
Yeah, I think when you're in the playoffs, it should be week to week to week. I think they should just get them all out of the way. You shouldn't have like breaks. If you want to have breaks, put it in the regular season, not during the playoffs. You know what I mean?
No more than a week or two off. Don't give them. They're really off for a month. A month. It's Talladega to Martinsville. Crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So here, conclusion. Thanks for listening. Let us know how we're doing. What you think? What's your favorite featured paint scheme from the 2005 NASCAR Busch Series? What do you think about our upshift downshift questions? And do you think NASCAR should interfere with the Harvick Elliott feud? And is it over? We'll see. I kind of hope it's over for the sake of everybody. And we just kind of keep guessing, and they keep us guessing, but they don't do anything. That's the perfect scenario right there. Make sure you follow us here. The show is at Robin Roller, just as it sounds, ROBANDROLLER. That's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Search Racing with Robin Roller on YouTube. You can find us there as well. Rob is personally on Twitter at RPEETRS33. That's Rob Peters 33. I'm at roller_01, ROLLER_01. So, hope you enjoyed the show today. Went a little bit longer than anticipated, but my goodness, it's either good racing or a lot of news. And this week is a little bit of both, and I thought we did an alright job of managing that. But there was just a lot of news to talk about and opinions to share. That's what we do this for. We like to share opinions. We like to share it with you. Give us, maybe it's a new idea, new outlook on something that you're not getting from someone else. So, hope you have a good, enjoyed this weekend of racing. For Rob Peters, I'm Josh Roller. Make sure you enjoy this weekend of racing at Texas Motor Speedway. Have a great week, everybody.